Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to present Cardiol Therapeutics, where we are focused on developing important new medicines in the area of heart disease. At Cardiol, we have developed a leadership position in a very important area of medicine, where we are targeting key underlying pathological processes which underlie heart failure and other important heart diseases. Our research is supported by a strong scientific rationale, a growing pipeline of important clinical targets. We now have 3 INDs approved by the FDA, which are underlying key clinical targets in cardiovascular medicine. We have a strong intellectual property portfolio. And importantly, in this challenging environment that we are facing, we now have we're fortunate to have a very strong financial position with our programs funded well into the future. The key underlying component, which really was the genesis of Cardiol Therapeutics, was a discovery made at the National Institute of Health that was published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, which basically demonstrated the ability of this unique molecule that we're developing, Cannabidiol, and its ability to reverse fibrotic processes and inflammatory processes in a model of diabetic cardiomyopathy. That's important because diabetes underlies a significant, about 60% of folks with heart failure have diabetes in their background. Based on these discoveries, we have now developed an advanced pipeline comprising now 2 important areas of cardiac medicine, which are both orphan eligible designations. This is important because orphan drug approvals speed the path to market and provide companies with periods of prolonged market exclusivity that can range anywhere from 7 to 10 years. Our major orphan program is in acute myocarditis, which remains the leading cause of sudden cardiac death in young people, people in their prime, in their 20s, and teenagers. We also have an important new development in recurrent pericarditis, which is our second cardiac orphan. We continue to pursue our cardioprotection trial, which is a viral-induced cardiac inflammation trial. And then we have a new innovative concept with a new formulation of the cannabidiol molecule, which will be delivered subcutaneously, more efficiently to concentrated hearts of disease. And we see this applicable to the mass market of heart failure. So our lead program is the ARCHER trial. This is a phase 2 trial, which is orphan drug eligible, and it's applicable to acute myocarditis. Many of you will have heard of myocarditis now because it is now widely recognized as a complication described associated with COVID virus. It's a rare but increasing complication associated with mRNA vaccination. It's also a complication secondary to the increasing use of oncological treatments, including checkpoint inhibitors in the oncology setting. Acute myocarditis is primarily caused by a viral infection in the heart. This remains a leading cause of sudden cardiac death in young folks. It can lead to fulminant heart failure in patients who do not have the classical risk factors associated with heart disease. And in severe cases, it can lead to lengthy ICU cases and necessitate cardiac transplantation. This slide illustrates the impact of myocarditis on cardiac tissue. On the left panel, you see normal cardiac tissue. That's the yellow panel on 100 times magnification. In the center panel, the red scarring is caused by the immune insult on the virus that has invaded the heart. So the immune system upregulates to endeavor to clear the virus from the heart and ends up causing damage or scarring in the heart tissue. Importantly, on the right, in the presence of the myocarditis condition with concomitant treatment of cannabidiol, you can see that the majority of the tissue is substantially preserved. Myocarditis is particularly devastating because there is currently no recognized standard of care. There are no FDA-approved therapies for acute myocarditis. And this is an extraordinarily costly condition to care for. In fact, the average hospitalization costs are approximately $110,000 per hospital stay, which averages over 7 days. So this is clearly an indication where a standard of care is required and hospitalization costs can be reduced, notwithstanding the tragic effects of this condition, which can lead to sudden cardiac death in otherwise young, healthy folks. We currently have what we believe to be the first international trial conducted in almost a decade. We're enrolling 100 patients at centers throughout the world. These include centers from North America, Latin America, Europe, and Israel. We'll enroll 100 patients, and the primary endpoint in this trial is really the gold standard by which improvements in diagnosis is made, which is MR, or magnetic resonance. We can very precisely measure cardiac function, extracellular volume, and global longitudinal strain, which are recognized by opinion leaders around the world as the key measures of diagnosis and prognosis in this condition. Key secondary endpoints include safety and improvements in cardiac function and quality of life. We're pleased to have attracted some of the foremost experts in cardiovascular medicine, myocarditis, and heart failure from around the world to join our steering committee, who has independently designed this international trial and is overseeing its conduct. This panel is co-chaired by Dennis McNamara from University of Pittsburgh and Les Cooper from the Mayo Clinic. They're collaborating with myocarditis and heart failure specialists from multiple countries around the world, many of which are involved in this landmark trial. Running in parallel with our myocarditis program is the second important area addressable to another important orphan indication, which is recurrent pericarditis. In the context of acute myocarditis, you primarily have inflammation in the heart muscle. In the case of pericarditis, this is an inflammatory condition that affects the sac that surrounds the heart. The heart then creates a friction against that inflammatory sac and can actually create scarring of the heart, or can tear the heart and cause extraordinary pain. This is a very debilitating condition for those affected. They become immobilized. Any really form of exercise can increase the heart rate and cause an increase in this pain syndrome. There has been one FDA-approved treatment in 2021, but this new innovative therapy comes at an extraordinary price at about $150,000 a year. And it's a very powerful therapy. It's a bit like hitting a tack with a sledgehammer. We believe there's a unique opportunity for a new innovative therapy to address the pain syndrome associated with recurrent pericarditis and be more cost-effective than the currently available treatment. This disease is very impactful in the healthcare system, with average hospitalizations ranging up to $30,000 per year. The trial that we have now announced the recent approval of is a phase 2 program. This really follows in the path of the recently approved drug in terms of their development cycle. This is an open label trial, which provides us a unique opportunity to look at the impact of our therapy on a key pain index, which is measured at 8 weeks. So patients are enrolled in an open label basis, and we measure the impact of our therapy 8 weeks following an induction of therapy. And we measure the changes in this important pain index. To the extent that we observe indications of effectiveness from this pain score, we would then look to go immediately to a pivotal phase 3 trial to underpin regulatory approval. As with the myocarditis program, this study was also designed by a panel of world-leading experts, chaired by Dr. Alan Klein from the Cleveland Clinic, who runs one of the largest pericarditis practices in the world today. He's collaborating with other international experts in this field. We look forward to initiating enrollment into this trial imminently and completing this trial in 2023. And then running in parallel with these two important programs in cardiac indications is the Lancer trial. The Lancer trial is studying the cardioprotective properties of cannabidiol on inflammation induced by viral infection in the heart. We know historically that patients with cardiovascular complications or a history of cardiovascular risk factors have a markedly elevated risk for mortality to the extent that they become impacted by the COVID virus, as illustrated on this Kaplan-Meier survival curve, where out 23 days, patients have about a 50% mortality versus patients without prior cardiovascular complications having over 98% survival. This trial was cleared by the Food and Drug Administration and is designed to enroll 422 patients across clinical trial centers in the United States, Mexico, and Brazil. And the primary endpoints of this study is to look at the ability of the cardioprotective benefits of our oral cannabidiol formulation to provide protection against major cardiovascular complications and to moderate inflammatory markers of cardiac inflammation. So that's where we're at with the oral formulation, which is being applied primarily in the cardiac orphan indications as an acute intervention to protect the cardiovascular system during the dangerous phase of disease, with a view to these typically young, otherwise healthy individuals fully recovering and going on to live a perfectly normal life. But we also have a very important new innovative formulation, which is a subcutaneous formulation of the cannabidiol molecule that we envisage being applied much like insulin or delivered like insulin, so the drug can go directly into the systemic circulation and manifest itself more efficiently at sites of disease. And we plan to apply this to the mass market of heart failure, which is arguably one of the largest medical markets in the world, probably only next to conditions such as diabetes. Heart failure at any one time affects 6 million people in Canada and the United States, 26 million people in the developed world, 30% mortality rate within 1 year and a 50% within 5 years. So the prognosis or diagnosis associated with heart failure has mortality rates very similar to many advanced forms of cancer. More importantly, or equally importantly, this remains the leading cause by which people are hospitalized and rehospitalized, and that drives about $30 billion in annual healthcare expenditures in the United States alone. If we look at the heart failure pathology, it's basically stratified into two major categories, one being systolic heart failure, one being diastolic heart failure. In systolic heart failure, you get enlarged ventricles and you get an inefficiency in the ability of the heart to function as a pump. There have been advances, significant advances in the treatment of systolic heart failure, whereas diastolic heart failure, where you get a thickening in the ventricle muscle and an inability of the heart to relax normally because of fibrosis and inflammation, there haven't been major advances in this area of medicine, and we see a unique opportunity to apply our anti-fibrotic agent in the chronic heart failure setting in this regard. We've worked now for many years with the DeBakey Heart Transplant Center in Texelou and Monterey, which are world-renowned research networks for developing new important innovations in heart medicine. DeBakey Heart Transplant Center was the home of the first heart transplant ever performed in the United States. And together we have now formulated and developed a clinic-ready new innovation, which is a subcutaneous formulation of this important antifibrotic agent. And the first illustration of the efficiency of this route of administration was first accepted for presentation at the American College of Cardiology sessions in 2020. And here we're showing the impact of 2 doses of the cannabidiol molecule delivered subcutaneously on a model of hypertension-induced non-ischemic cardiomyopathy or non-ischemic heart failure. BNP is a marker elevated in the majority of heart failure patients. It's really a marker of heart failure or cardiac stretch. And you can see here on the left bar, you see normal. The red bar is elevated BNP as a result of the heart failure state. And then when we treated in this experimental model with 1 mg per kilo, as well as 10 mg per kilo, we significantly reduced the levels of BNP, this key marker of heart failure. This is an important observation because the FDA-approved dosing regimen for cannabidiol is 10 mg per kilo. However, when we went to 1/10 of that dose, we still reverse this key marker of heart failure, underlying the efficiency by which this improved way of delivering this molecule can offer hope for patients to have a more effective therapy, a more therapeutic dose with a more efficient delivery strategy. We made this same observation with respect to the fibrotic process in the cardiac tissue. On the left panel here, you see normal cardiac tissue. One panel in, that bluish staining on the slide, is fibrotic lesions or regions of the heart undergoing fibrosis or death. And at 10 mg per kilo, we observed an amelioration or resolution of this fibrotic process. But once again, interestingly, we observed the same at 1/10 of the known therapeutic dose for cannabidiol. So here we're observing a more efficient way to deliver this important new cardiac medication in a state-of-the-art way, subcutaneously, and we're targeting one of the major pathological processes associated with the development and progression of one of the leading causes of death and disability in the Western world, which is diastolic heart failure. So the major milestones we have set for this organization over the next 12 to 18 months, which we believe will drive significant value creation in this organization, is we plan to initiate and complete patient enrollment in 2 key areas of cardiac medicine, both of which are orphan drug eligible. We plan to complete the trial in viral-induced cardiac inflammation, which is a proof of concept cardioprotection study. We plan to advance our new important subcutaneous formulation into formal development for the mass market of heart failure. And we plan to continue to advance our innovative pipeline, looking at new anti-inflammatory strategies to complement our lead product portfolio. Our management comprises experts in all the necessary disciplines with over 30 years experience in developing important new therapeutics in medicine. We have extraordinary talent on the medical affairs, and as Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Andrew Hammer, who has spent many years in heart failure practice. He trained under the world-renowned Harvey White, who's a widely regarded clinical trialist in the area of heart failure medicine. And Andrew has run as principal or co-investigator, has been involved in over 40 multi-center clinical trials in cardiovascular disease. He also spent several years with Amgen, heading the Repatha program, one of their largest cardiometabolic efforts. We have a veteran financial officer, Chris Waddock. Dr. Andrea Parker is the former chief scientific officer of the Peter Monk Cardiac Center, has been involved in running several major clinical efforts in cardiovascular medicine, and extraordinary talent on the chief operating side, as well as on the regulatory side. Our board of directors is international and diverse in its talent pool, comprising expertise in cardiovascular medicine and heart failure developments, strategy, Wall Street experience, pharmacology on the cannabidiol side, extraordinary talents on the pharmaceutical side, as well as on the legal and financial side. Our scientific advisory board includes Dr. Paul Ridker, who's world-renowned for his work in studying the role of inflammation and atherosclerosis and widely published on the subject matter. Bruce McManus has studied the interrelationship between inflammation, heart failure, and myocarditis for over 2 decades. And Dr. Joe Hills, the editor-in-chief of the journal Circulation for the American Heart Association, is widely and internationally recognized as a key opinion leader in the area of diastolic heart failure. Our capital structure is well represented by insiders at 10% and 4% represented by our partners, including our research and our pharmaceutical partners. We're fortunate to be well capitalized. At the end of June 2022, we had just over 70 million in cash, and that funds our programs well into the future through completion of what we believe to be value creation milestones. So just in summary, we're developing what we believe to be a state-of-the-art cannabidiol formulation, both in oral and subcutaneous form. This is covered by a broad family of intellectual property protecting our rights in this growing important area of cardiovascular medicine. It's supported by a strong scientific rationale, a clinical pipeline that now comprises 3 INDs approved by the Food and Drug Administration. We're fortunate to be in a strong financial position to execute across all of our programs, and we've assembled an extraordinary team of leadership, scientific advisory panel, board of directors, and steering committees to oversee our developments into the future.